S.O.A.P video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We are starting a brand new series with this video.
Yay!
And you get 66 chances to guess what book we're doing next.
Wow.
Wow. I would suggest you start guessing from the beginning.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe you skip the first three.
Yeah, right. We are going to spend 8 sessions in the book of Numbers.
Right. How can we possibly, there's only 10 numbers, how can we possibly spend so long?
Well, the book of Numbers has 40 chapters in it.
That's how.
And 40, right? 36. I knew I was going to mess that up.
We'll edit that
I just looked at it. The book of Numbers has 36 chapters in it. And it's actually a surprising book. Because there are, if somebody grew up in church or they've heard Sunday school stories or whatever, there are a handful of stories where you know they exist, but you're not sure where. Yeah.
In Numbers?
They're in Numbers.
Nice. Good deal.
Yeah, and we'll come across them, so we're not going to give you the spoilers now, but we will come across them so that, you know, every week or so, every couple of weeks, you'll be like, hey, I didn't know that was in Numbers.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right, so if we start at the beginning, Genesis, we would say, is basically the beginning, the start. Exodus would be Moses, Genesis ends with Joseph and a small 75 members of his family going to Egypt,
right,
and actually being very prosperous there.
Yeah.
Exodus it didn't keep being prosperous.
They got really big.
Yeah, they got really big and became a threat to the government, and were made into slaves. And the whole Exodus would be the leaving part, getting out. So Leviticus would be the giving of the law.
Yep.
And now we're in Numbers.
Yep.
So how do you categorize Numbers besides a lot of numbers about people and animals and things?
Well, fun fact about the names of the Old Testament books. They usually come from the Greek translation of the Old Testament, not their Hebrew names.
Okay.
It's called the Septuagint. It was written or translated about a couple hundred years before Jesus, in between the Old and New Testament time period. So the name Genesis is Greek for beginning. Right. The Hebrew name is Bereshit, which is in the beginning, the first word of the book. A lot of times, at least a couple of these start out with the first name of the book. Exodus is the Greek word for departure.
Yep.
So there it is, right? You know, yep. Leviticus has to do with the Levitical system, right? So the sacrificial system. Numbers.
Yeah, not so much.
Yes, Numbers. The Hebrew name is Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Guess what the story
which is
of
exactly
Numbers.
Where they're at, right? Right.
They're traveling from Sinai. They're going to go to Canaan. Everything's going to be wonderful. They're going to take the land of Canaan, and it's going to be great, right?
Yeah, basically a 30-year camping trip, right?
Yeah, is what it turned into because they didn't do what they were supposed to do. So now we're going to spend, basically 40 years in the wilderness. Well, the Greek name is not based on their wanderings in the wilderness. The Greek name is based on the fact that at the beginning of Numbers and at the end of Numbers, they take a census. And what is the census about? Numbers,
yeah.
And
so that's how they get it?
And that's how they get it.
Right.
The Greek name is arithmetoi. I wonder if there's... No joke.
I believe you.
Yeah, arithmetoi, of course, we get arithmetic from. And it's just numbers. That's all it means is numbers.
Right. So we're going to see a lot of raw numbers.
A lot of numbers in here.
A lot of numbers in here, and it is so easy just to skip over them. Which I will always do. But some of the fun facts that you're talking about are hidden in there. Yeah. So that's what we'll try to point out to people along the way.
Yeah. So we're going to do the first 3 chapters in this week, and it's okay to gloss over some of this stuff, and we're not going to read every word of the entire book. Probably we'll skip over some of the things. But they are taking a census. And why would they need to take a census, do you suppose?
The main reason I got was God told them to.
Well, that's a very important reason.
Right.
If God says
Right.
count everybody, then...
Yeah, but you take account. You take account beforehand, so you know what you have.
Yeah.
And you know where your strengths are, and you also know where your weaknesses are.
Yeah.
As part of
So,
the census.
quick background. They've come out of Egypt. It took them a little more than 3 months to get to Mount Sinai. And then when they were at Mount Sinai, God downloaded the law, and there's the golden calf, and they're building the tabernacle. They were at Mount Sinai for about a year.
Yeah.
Before they...
And this is where God was a tower of fire.
Yeah. Well, he was up on the mountain. There was the fire and everything,
Right.
and then when they got
Ready to
on the
move.
way there was the tower of or pillar of cloud and fire day and night,
Yeah.
right? And then when they were moving, right? And when the cloud or the fire stopped, that's where they set up camp until it started moving again, and they never knew when and how long and all that. So they've...
Right, but can you imagine that, right? You take off from Egypt, and you have some people following you.
Oh, yeah.
And, there's the whole parting of the Red Sea, going across. They wouldn't know that the whole army is gone.
Right.
So you just keep running.
Right.
And you can only run so far for so long. And after a while, you're kind of settling down. But it's been 2 years. And how long have they been looking over their shoulders, waiting for something to catch up to them?
Yeah, so they knew that Pharaoh and his army died in the sea, but that doesn't mean that the next Pharaoh's not going to come back up. Yeah,
right, exactly.
And so that brings up a good question: how many people are we really talking about here?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we wouldn't know if it weren't for
exactly
this census.
Right.
And the first census tells us. Well, break it down for us. How
I just said I'm not going over a bunch of numbers.
not everything.
I think we end up with what, 600,000?
Yeah. So they're
650,000?
counting.
Yeah, it's kind of cool the way they count.
Only certain people and certain.
So they're only counting males.
Right.
Right. And they're only counting males that are 18 years and older.
I think
right?
it's 20.
That's
I think,
for
20,
19 and older.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So 20.
yeah,
20 and
over
older.
19, right? So 20 and older.
Right. Which I was kind of noting, that seems old. From the standpoint of, because they want to see how many can be in an army, or God wants them to see how many can be in an army.
And that's really they're counting military-aged men is really what he's counting.
Right, and we are 4,000 years ago. Mm-hmm. And in today's world, the U.S. Army is 17 and older.
Yeah.
So even back then it was a little bit older, and you think that the life expectancy was somewhat shorter than that. They would have started at 13 or some much younger age to be in an army, but they're still around. They're 20 and above.
Well, and that doesn't mean that that's what everybody in every civilization did. That's just what God had.
Yeah. Right. Got
do.
These guys do.
So we end up with about 603,000 roughly.
Right.
Okay.
And everybody they go back to where you're at in Israel.
Yep.
Not the nation, but the man.
Yep.
And the 12 sons.
The tribes, yeah.
Where do you fall in with? And we talked a lot about the tribes, especially when we were in the Old Testament, when there was separation, and Benjamin stayed with Judah and in the southern tribes, and you had your northern tribes. But here, man, every other verse is tying somebody back to a tribe with a person in charge.
Yep.
And I would say that's the other big thing is the leadership there, that people are named, tribes are named, how many people are in there are named, and it just permeates through the first 3 chapters.
Yeah.
Now these guys are on the move all the time, and we have the Ark of the Covenant there. Yep. We have a tabernacle. We have some things that need to be taken care of.
Yep.
And we find that these are all, every time they move, they're packaged up and they're in the middle.
Yep.
Like you would expect. And then around them would be the Levites or the priests. Yep. And then around them is everybody else.
The tribes protecting.
Yeah, all the tribes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And whatever tribe you're in, that dictates where you're at, whether you're on the north, south, east, west side.
Yeah, because when they stopped for camp, they would set up the tent of meeting or the tabernacle, and the Ark of the Covenant goes in there, and the altar has to be set up because they don't know how long they're going to be there.
Right.
And so they get all that set up, and then 3 tribes camp around the outside of it.
Yep. And if you're really in the numbers, that's great. You can figure out how many's in the front, how many's in the back, how many are on the sides.
Yep.
And it's not equal. I'll give you that much.
Right.
And I'll trust a commentary for that one.
So if we have, let's just round it way down because it's 603 and change. Let's just say 600,000, right?
Yep.
And these are 20 years old, 20 years and older, which means they can marry.
Right.
Right. So let's say each one of those men is married, and maybe has
trying to figure out total number.
Yeah, maybe has one child, and that's it. You've taken your 600,000 to 1.8 million very quickly.
Right.
And that, I'm pretty sure, is a low number.
For some reason, I thought like in Exodus, it said like 2.5 million came out. Was that just?
Yeah, I don't think it actually says. I think that number comes from
this and extrapolation. And,
because you're gonna have men who have aged out of being military. You're gonna have lots of children. You've got mothers and sisters, and what are the chances you really have only one man plus a wife and one child?
Right.
It's easily over 2 million people who are camped around Mount Sinai here, who are wandering through the walking through the desert.
So think about that. 2+ million people walking through the desert.
Yeah.
They're going to be seen.
Yeah, right. I mean, you're not sneaking through, right?
Food, just trampling.
Yeah.
Just using.
Yeah, you come up to an oasis or a water or something.
2 million people getting a drink.
Plus,
how long would that take?
Plus animals.
Right.
Plus, okay, so there's pluses, right? So plus animals, you got to feed, you got to water all your animals. Right. Plus, we're told that there were a lot of foreigners, Egyptians and other people who came out of Egypt with them. They're not counted,
right? Because
they weren't part of the 12 tribes.
Right. Wow.
So this is a huge operation.
Right. So you need to have the division. You need to have the understanding. Really, these heads were basically, you would think, hey, keep track of your tribe.
Yeah.
So they were all camping in the same spots, being familiar with people. I'm sure there was interactions with other tribes.
Oh yeah.
But there were some limitations too, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, especially if you camp for, days or weeks in a certain place, there's kids running all over the place. Everybody's still coming to the tabernacle at the center. They're still offering their sacrifices. They're learning how to obey the law. They're still cousins. They're still, literally their family.
Right. And they're all still worried too.
Yeah.
Right. I love it. The part that gets in with the Levites on the jobs that they have.
Yeah.
Very specific. Your job is to, you have the table.
Yeah.
That's your job.
Yep.
I'm not sure what you do with the table, but that's your job, the table.
Yeah.
But ideally you would pack it, you would carry it, you would be responsible for getting it from point A to point B and setting it up, and I'm positive it mattered which way it went.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Everything was
dictated.
Down to the centimeter, the millimeter, the inch, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, away from each other.
Yep.
And,
Yep. When they tore down, when they set up, the tribe of Levi was split into 3 clans or 3 houses, and each clan had specific roles that they were supposed to play in the setup and the teardown, and in the temple, or not temple yet, but in the tabernacle service itself. Only one of those clans was actually the priests. That's why when we talk about priests and Levites, only
2 separate.
Right, they're all from the tribe of Levi, but then the priests are a subset of Levites from Moses and Aaron's family.
Right.
right? Because Aaron was the high priest, and
Right.
only that family could be priests. Well, there's still 2 other families. So what do? Well, you're going to be in charge of this, and you're going to be in charge of this.
Right. So, and they're excluded from the first counts,
Yeah.
right? And from the tribes. So when you're reading about the tribes, there's 12 of them, but the Levites aren't in there.
Right.
And it's kind of an interesting thing. You have to do a double take. Well, who's in there twice?
Yep.
So who's in there twice?
Well, if you go back to Genesis 49, Joseph had 2 sons, and you'll notice that Joseph is not listed.
Right.
And so Joseph is replaced by one of his sons, and then the other son replaces Levi in this counting.
Yeah, sometimes the counting is different.
Yeah, and so they're actually throughout the Old and New Testament. When you're counting the 12 tribes, usually there's one that's left out because you got Joseph in there twice.
Right.
Or if Joseph is listed, a lot of times then you have all of the 12 sons. There's a difference between the 12 sons and the 12 tribes depending on what the context of why they're being listed.
Right.
So that's fun to match those up, and
Yeah.
why is Levi not being counted in this? I mean, they're counted, but they don't count in this census.
Well, because he's special, right?
Yep.
Set apart.
Yep.
Is that where you're going?
Well, because it is right for 2 reasons. One that you're thinking of, and one that I'm thinking of. The one I'm
So in other words, I'm wrong, and you're being gracious.
No, because it's true. The one I'm thinking of is more practical. What we've already been talking about is that Levites weren't supposed to go to war. They weren't supposed to serve in the military.
Kind of in the middle and protected by
Right, because you can't send all your Levites out to war, because then you have nobody to do temple service or tabernacle. I keep saying temple service. It will eventually be temple service, tabernacle service, right? But how he goes about doing that, I think, is what you're thinking of.
Yeah, so God basically says, "Look, I get the firstborn. I get first fruits. I need the first of everything. It's mine.
Yep.
Everything else is yours." So he says, "How about all your firstborns?" And God says, "Look, I want you to count them and tell me how many there are." So they come up with a number, and then he says, "Oh, okay, we're going to leave them where they're at, but I'm going to take the Levites."
So all the firstborn, that includes people, firstborn sons,
Yeah,
right?
and
Firstborn
animals.
sons and animals, and then the first fruits of the ground every year are to be dedicated to God, right? Is
Right.
For God's use.
Right. So he's setting instead he says, "I'm going to take the nation of Levites, the tribe of Levites,
Right.
and they are going to replace these firstborns." But the idea is all the food, all the animals go into the Levites as payment.
Right. For
that.
So
that's how they get fed.
So I'm a
That's how
firstborn son. So my dad's not, but I'm a firstborn son. So let's say I'm of the tribe of Dan, for instance.
His favorite tribe.
Actually, they're not. It's really not a good. Dan's not exact. Daniel in the Old Testament, great.
Yeah,
Dan, not so much. But let's say
big shoes to fill.
Yeah, right. Let's say I'm of the tribe of Dan, whatever. Right. But I'm a firstborn, which means that I should be set apart for service to God. And what God has said is, I'm going to use all of the Levites instead of your firstborn son. So there's a Levite over there somewhere who is effectively taking my place,
Right.
as he's doing his service to God, so that I can just be a regular part of the community.
Right.
So that's how that's how that works.
And it's really interesting that the numbers don't quite match up.
Yeah.
So what is it? 22,273 firstborn males. The tribe of Levite had 22,000.
Yeah.
So there's a difference of 273. And you're thinking, yeah,
It's rounding,
Yeah.
right? It's rounding. It doesn't really matter because we're just substituting and trading anyway, right?
yeah, but turns out it matters.
It does matter. God is very
Because
particular about
God wants that 273.
Yeah.
So there's also the ability to pay for these people.
Redeem or almost buy out. Yeah.
Yeah, like a buyout.
Yep.
And the best, and it's what, 5 shekels or a shekel, 1 shekel.
A couple of shekels, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot the exact amount, but it turns out it's about 2 ounces of silver.
Yeah.
Which in today's world is $40.
Yeah.
You got to imagine during that time, it was probably more in the whole scheme of things, but we're not talking about millions and millions of dollars, not anything close. But God still wants it, right?
Yeah.
And He's particular for it. And to me, that was the most interesting part of the reading this week.
Well, and it wasn't supposed to be, and that's the whole point, right? It wasn't supposed to be detrimental. It wasn't supposed to put anybody into bankruptcy.
Right.
It was supposed to be enough that they felt it because it mattered, but not so much that it hurt them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
God wanted them to know from the very beginning, I've said, all of your firstborn are mine. They're dedicated to me.
Right.
And so you need to, and this is perpetual, you need to realize that they are dedicated to me.
But the cool thing is, so now the Levites have been set apart intentionally.
Yep.
They are the ones that are going to be taking care of the ark, the tabernacle, all the priestly duties, everything about that. And now they have some funding, to start with.
Yeah.
And each year they're going to be getting animals, sacrifices, first fruits.
Right.
So now they're fed and taken care of.
Because when they go into the land of Canaan, they will not get tribal land. All of the other tribes will have land. They'll have space to
and
farm.
the ability to
everything that comes with it.
Yep.
Levites won't have that because they're full-time serving at the tabernacle and the temple. They don't have time to farm. They don't have time to do all that.
How cool is that? And
so God's already planned that. And that's really the big thing about this week's reading. Why do we have to read this stuff? Why, can't, and the reason really is because God cares about details. These things do matter.
Right.
And when He sets a plan in motion, it's going to work only if we do it His way.
Yeah. Well, and okay, 2 shekels, whatever it turns out to be, doesn't matter. Well, it turns out it does, right? It's seed money, and you're having people whose only job it is to be in the tabernacle that can't make outside money. Yeah. How do they live? How do they have money? How does this work?
Yeah. If you want somebody to be full-time serving in a certain capacity or working in a certain capacity, they can't be, working somewhere else.
Right.
I mean, their attention would be divided.
They can't be farming.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you can't have your Levites farming. So God said,
we're closing temple this week because crops are in.
Yeah. And God said it's just not going to work that way. Yeah. Your number one priority is ministering at the altar, where people are bringing their sacrifices, at the incense and the table and all this stuff, basically serving me. I'm your number one priority. And because I'm your number one priority, everybody is going to pay for that to make sure that it happens.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that's why this is neat.
Yeah.
At least to me.
Yep.
22,273. Interesting, but then it's very interesting as to why that number is different.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So take your time.
Yeah.
When you find some numbers, try to dig into it a little bit and see why that matters.
Yep.
And there's generally going to be a logical reason behind it.
And learn something about God in the process.
Yeah.
Not just about the history, but about
about Him.
About Him, why He does what He does.
Good point.
Yeah. I hope you'll find it interesting. We find it interesting.
Yeah. To deal with numbers all the time, right? So it's kind of cool. Ooh.
We hope you find it interesting. We hope you find it helpful in your spiritual life. Again, as we just said, as you're learning about God, too, not just something that happened 3,500, 4,000 years ago to people who are long dead. Right. We're learning about the God who never changes. And so hopefully you find that helpful and encouraging in your life. We'd love to field your questions. If you have any, make sure you send them in. Share this with other people, and we will continue our little trek through the wilderness.
Nice.
Next time.
Nice. Have a good week, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.